Right now there's a fire snapping away in front of me, and at my back stands a wall of pine boughs I spent 2 solid hours raising against the weather. The snow's falling soft, the kind that comes ahead of the heavy stuff. I put this camp together the way nearly any man would, the way the eye says is right. Fire ahead of me, throwing its heat, a wall behind, keeping it close, and a camp built just like this one has stilled more hearts in the snow than every storm those men ever ran from. That sits wrong, I know. A fellow turns up frozen after a blizzard, and of course you blame the blizzard. The wind, the drifts, the cold falling out of a starless sky. Everybody tells it that way. But the men who dug their own friends out of the April melt told it different, and it goes like this. The weather is hardly ever the thing that takes you. The thing that takes you is the camp you believed in, the one your own hands raised, the one you were proud of, the one that had you warm and easy for an hour and dead sure you'd done right by yourself. Being sure is the bait here. So ride with me a while, because once you understand what's rotten in the way most men make a winter camp, you'll never bed down by a fire the same way twice. First, though, you ought to know who's talking, so you don't take this for guesswork. I've spent whole winters by myself, where the closest wood stove was 2 days off through snow that swallowed me to the belt. A few of the camps I made kept me breathing. One of them, just the one, came within a hair of killing me, and I'll get to that camp before we part, because it's why this particular cold sits down in the marrow and not just in my recollection. Nobody taught me this off a page. They learned it the only way it ever truly takes hold, jolting awake at some godless hour, shaking too hard to even light a match, finally seeing what they'd gotten wrong. A couple of them learned it the worst way there is, kneeling next to somebody who never opened his eyes again. The first thing they pounded into me runs opposite to what most men believe. The notion that fire plus a wall comes out to a safe night, that a flame ahead and something firm behind means you'll see morning. Picture the scene. A healthy blaze, a little lean-to of cut branches, a man wrapped in wool right in the middle. Looks unbeatable. It isn't, and why it isn't holds up this whole talk, so don't set it down. The men who went stiff in camps just like that weren't caught out under open sky. They had their fire. They had their walls. They had the entire list of things a man's supposed to need, and they died regardless, close enough to touch flames that were still throwing light when somebody stumbled on them. I'm going to lay out for you precisely how a man beside a live fire freezes solid. Not this minute, though. Tuck it away, because it outweighs every other thing I've got for you tonight. But none of that comes clear until you grasp the one fact about cold that gets told wrong everywhere. It's a question of where your warmth actually runs off to once you stretch out. You picture cold as the air, don't you? The sting on your face, the ache working into your hands. So you fight the air, raise a wall to kill the wind, light a fire to take the chill off, and you figure the matter's settled. But the air was never the one to fear. Underneath you, that was the one. A man laid out on hard frozen ground is laid out on a pickpocket. The dirt, the packed snow, the stone below your back, it carries a deeper cold than the air ever manages, and it's got hold of you along your whole length. Cold isn't content to sit quiet either. It hauls. It comes up through the wool, through the coat, through everything you brought, and it siphons the warm right out of your spine quicker than any fire can shove it back into your chest. The lab people gave it a name lately. Conduction, they call it. The old fellows never bothered with a name. They simply understood the earth was famished and that it would feed on a sleeping man clean through while his cheeks stayed rosy from the coals. So there's the snare. It clamps down the second you lie back. The camp that feels correct, fire forward and wall behind, throws the door wide on the one quarter that's killing you. Below, You spend every ounce of care on the gust and the barrier, and the entire time the frozen floor is bleeding the warmth from your back as you doze, and you won't notice a thing until you're past the point of saving. This is the bend in the trail where most men go off it, so pull in close, because if this won't take root, nothing past it will keep breath in you. Most men carry the idea that warmth climbs, so they spare no thought for what's below their bodies. They carry the idea that a fire keeps a man. They carry the idea that the threat always rides in from somewhere out there, the storm, the dark above. Out here, every last one of those ideas is a way to end up dead. Warmth doesn't lift off you in any fashion that does you good once you're flat on your spine. Your fire warms the air, and the air ferries that warmth off on a whisper of wind. And the threat was never out there at all. It's the half-foot of frozen earth set hard against your backbone. Dwell on this stretch, because it sorts out who really had this country figured. The first peoples here, the ones who'd put 1,000 winters behind them on this same ground, almost never ended up this way because not once did they stretch out on naked earth. They raised a deep bed of boughs and bark and hide beneath them before they so much as looked at lighting anything. To them the bedding mattered more than the blaze. The dead ones were the latecomers, the trappers and the gold hunters and the homesteaders who showed up and picked up firecraft and wallcraft, and never once picked up the fact that the wall a man most needs is the one he sleeps on top of. They took the lessons they could watch with their eyes. They left behind the one that was buried and silent and holding the whole roof up. That one lesson, missed, is the entire distance between strolling out under the spring sun and getting found in the runoff, drawn up tight beside a circle of gray ash. So here's the way of it, and I'll feed it to you a piece at a time, the way it reached me, because tipping the whole bucket out at once would wash the worth right off it. Piece 1 stands your thinking on its head. You make your bed before you make your fire. The bed is the thing that pulls you through. The fire is the thing that makes you feel good. And a man who has those two switched is a man already halfway to trouble. You stagger into camp at the tail of a punishing day, frozen and emptied and craving nothing on this earth but flame, and every nerve says light it now. Resist. Hand your first good hour to what goes beneath your body. Heap the boughs, the soft, springy evergreen, course on course, till you've raised a mat as deep as your forearm runs long. Deeper if your back will let you. It mashes flat once your weight's on it, so stack it to twice the height that seems sensible. That mat is what pries the earth's fingers off you. There's the wall that earns its keep, and it's the one not a soul bothers to raise. Piece 2 is the one most every living man has flipped around. Your fire has no business in front of you. It belongs along your side, and better still, it belongs stretched out long. The cozy little campfire in your head, the neat circle of stones cupping a friendly flame, it warms the half of you that faces it and hands the other half over to the night. You scorch your front and chill your back and burn the dark away, turning over and over like meat on a turnspit, never warm all the way to the center even once. The old fellows laid what they called a long fire. No tidy ring, but a line, a furrow of coals run out the full reach of a grown man, set down the length of where he meant to sleep, so the heat reached him crown to heel, level and unbroken, clear till dawn. A fire to lie down the length of, not one to sit hunched and gaze into. Piece 3 feels nearly like a swindle once it dawns on you. You set something behind your back to fling the heat forward, not to break the wind, though it'll handle that besides, to throw it back. You pile logs, or stack stone, or tamp snow into a wall on the fire's far flank, the side turned away from you, and that wall gathers the heat that meant to wander off into nowhere and pitches it back down across you and your bedding. A fire in the open gives half its warmth to the empty night for free. A fire with a backstop hands that half right back. old as anything, older than anybody can fix a date to, and the only price is the sweat of stacking. Piece 4 is the one that blindsides everybody, the one that sounds like foolishness till it locks in. The tighter you build your shelter, the warmer you'll lie. Every instinct in a man tells him to build roomy, a generous lean-to, a proud big shelter, somewhere he can rise up on an elbow and feel he's got space to spare. And that very instinct is what turns him to ice. Each cubic foot of air penned inside that shelter is air your body's got to warm off nothing but itself. Build it grand and you're warming a hayloft with a birthday candle. Build it mean, just broad enough to worm into and not a finger wider, low and snug and pressing in on you, and your own heat brims that little hollow and holds there. The men who lived to tell it raised shelters so cramped they looked dug into a grave, which is near the truth of what they did, letting the snow itself, banked thick over a small den, seal their warmth in like a heavy quilt. The man who throws up a palace in the snow turns to stone inside it. The man who builds himself a snug coffin steps out at first light. Now double back to the thing I had you keep, that puzzle of how a man beside a fire freezes through. Here it is, laid bare, and once it settles in, the rest snaps tight around it. A man rolls into camp late, frozen, run down to the last thread. He does the natural thing, the plain thing, the thing that wears the face of survival. He builds a fire, tall and bright and fine to look at, and he throws it up in a hurry because the cold's in him and he wants heat this second. He stands a quick screen of branches at his back to feel walled in. And then, hollowed out, he lays himself on the bare snow between the flame and the screen, and an hour goes by where he's warm and thankful and convinced down to his boots that he got it right. But the earth's been at him the whole while. It's drawing warmth out his back faster than the flame can pour it in his front. The fire sinks low as he sleeps, the way they all do, and its heat never reached past the skin to begin with. And someplace in the lightless heart of the night, his body, slipping the long contest with the frozen floor, begins closing the shutters one after another. The shivering, which all along was his body crying out for help, finally goes still, and the stillness feels like ease, feels like thawing. The men hauled back from the very brink all report the identical thing. Right at the last they felt warm, they felt at peace. A few felt warm enough that they shed their coats. They've turned up men frozen rigid with their coats hanging open and their camp still half raised around them. Because at the bitter end, the cold tells you a lie, swears blind you're warm when you've never in your life been nearer gone. That heavy, easy peace settling over a freezing man, that's no safety. That's the cold taking the hand. That's a body stripped of its heat from underneath, folding the last of its cards. And that, just exactly that, is how a man beside a fire freezes to death, brimming with flame down one side and poured out into the ground down the other. By now you're likely asking why no one ever set this in front of you, why it isn't just something everybody knows. And the reason is plain and honest and hides no scheme of anyone's. A scrap of survival lore only outlives the men who pass it as long as men still have call to use it. The day the cabin got its stove, the day the walls got their stuffing, the day a fellow could lay down money for a bag good to 40 below and a tent that stands itself up in a couple minutes, the lore started leaking away. No man passes down a rule he'll never have cause to lean on. Your grandfather may well have known to lay the bed ahead of the fire. His grandfather past doubt did. But somewhere on the way down it dropped out of the telling because the furnace robbed it of its use, and a thing with no use stops getting spoken. Then it curdled further, and here's the part that ought to set your jaw. The kit they sell you these days is made to be used backwards. They sell you a tent and shoot the picture with it pitched flat on naked dirt. They sell you a sleeping bag and breathe not one word that a bag on frozen ground isn't worth half the number on its tag, because the cold beneath squashes the fill flat and steals your warmth straight through the bottom. They sell you the fire ring and the slick lantern and the do-everything gadget, and never a one of them lets slip the oldest truth going, that what lies under you weighs more than the whole pile of it together. There's no coin in telling a man the thing that saves him is free and grows on a tree. There's a fortune in selling him a camp that fails him soft and silent in the dark. Now I'll lay it down for you honest, the same as I'd hope somebody would do for me, because your trust is worth more to me than you walking off impressed. When the folks who do nothing but tally how the cold kills keep arriving at the same door, you can carry that one to the bank and cash it. I said I'd tell you about the camp that nearly finished me. I threw it together fast, light bleeding out of the sky, a storm bearing down, and I committed every sin I'm steering you clear of. Big fire out front, wall behind, and I lay flat on the snow because I was too whipped and too cold to go cutting boughs. Came to somewhere in the dead black of the night and noticed the shivering had quit. Felt almost warm, felt almost easy. And some scrap of me the old fellows had drilled sat bolt upright and called that ease by its right name, the cold, lying to my face. I got up. I built the bed I had no business skipping the first time, and I spent what was left of that night working close to as hard as I slept just to hold the line. I've not once laid my body on bare ground since, not a single time. Here's the way you pack all this off with you, not as dread, as a plain habit of doing the thing right. The bed leads every time before the fire, before anything else at all. You break the ground's contact before you so much as lift a finger toward anything else. You run your fire long and along your side, not small and out in front. You set a wall behind that fire to sling the heat back onto you, and you keep your shelter small, drawn in, close, no wider than your body has to have, and you square up to the lie when it comes. When the cold swears you're warm, when the ease comes stealing over you, and the shivering quits and holding still starts to feel fine, you name that exact feeling the enemy it is, and you rise and you stir. Not a dollar of it comes out of your pocket. That's the piece I treasure most, because the thing that drags you through is the bough bed under your back, the one every freezing man waves off because he's too hot to get at the flames. The whole answer lay on the ground the entire night. He just stacked his fire on top of it where his bed ought to have gone. And maybe that's the deeper lesson, the one that runs past shelters and past winter both. Those men didn't perish because the cold bore them any malice, because the cold was never anything but the cold. They perished from being sure that a flame added up to warmth, sure a wall at the spine added up to safety, sure they'd already laid hands on the one thing that had slipped clean through their fingers. This country takes its time with a humble man and makes short work of a sure one. The old fellows dreaded their own certainty worse than they ever dreaded the storm, and of every trick I've handed you, that's the one I'd press on you first. So let me hear it, down where you leave your comments. The bit of cold country know-how your own family kept alive, the kind the rest of the world's mostly mislaid by now. Something that got handed over a supper table or off the back of a truck and never once touched paper. Put it down for me, because I've a hunch a few of you are still sitting on the exact thing I'm out here trying to drag back into the light. Come next time, I've got another for you that cuts hard against good sense. An old rule about fire itself, about why the biggest, fiercest blaze a man can raise is so often the one that leaves him worse off than no fire at all. And I'll show you what the old hands raised in its stead. Till then, keep an eye on what's underneath you, and don't you ever let a warm feeling in the cold tell you how you're doing.